Does everyone see that?
Yes.
All right. We are on the record. This is Charnay Sherry versus Froedtert South, case number CR 2018-02354. Today is January 7th, 2001. It is approximately 9:49 a.m. We are here today for the hearing in Charnay Sherry versus Froedtert South. The issue, as identified on the notice of hearing, is whether the respondent, as alleged in the complaint, violated the Wisconsin Care Protection Act by taking disciplinary action because the complainant in good faith reported or is believed to have reported any information under Section 146.9972A of the Wisconsin statutes. The parties off record have indicated that settlement is not an option in this case. So with that being said, I'd like the parties' appearances, please. Complainant?
Alan Olson and Associates. On behalf of the complainant, Charnay Sherry. Charnay Sherry appears in person.
All right.
And Attorney Debbie Krukowski appearing on behalf of Froedtert South Incorporated.
And the representative?
The representative is Tom Kelly.
Okay, in his position?
He is the in-house counsel for Froedtert South.
Thank you. Sorry, I just need that for the record. All right. Okay, so as I stated off the record, we are recording this. So please, let's all try not to speak over one another. I know even I have that issue once in a while. If you do have any technological difficulties and lose audio or video, if you see that there is a chat option that you can send a message or raise your hand, so you can use either one of those two features. Also, please note that I'm going to be taking notes. I'm going to be typing these notes as the hearing goes on, so I may need to stop you to make sure I get something in the notes. So I will try, like I said, not to speak over you. I may just, say stop if you see, me, I guess, wave my hand like this. Just know that I just need you to slow down for, a minute. All right. So
Sure.
Just, and also, it may be, we have several sets of exhibits here because unfortunately, there were many exhibits that didn't, our office couldn't get them into just one set. So just bear with me as we move through the exhibits. All right. So let me just, okay, I believe I have everything that I need at my disposal now. Let's, I guess, get started with the complainant's case. Mr. Olson, your first witness.
Yes, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Nicholas Galich or Galich.
And I'm sorry, before I have you take the oath, I'm just going to silence my phone right now. I'm just going to remind anyone else who has a phone next to them to do so. All right. All right. Mr. Galich? I'm sorry, is it Galich or Galich?
Galich.
Galich. Okay. Mr. Galich, would you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Great. Mr. Olson, you may get started.
Thank you, Mr. Galich. Where do you work?
Froedtert South.
And is that commonly referred to as FSI?
Typically, it's referred to as Froedtert South.
Okay, then I'll use that if that's most comfortable for you. And how long have you worked at Froedtert South?
Just over 18 years.
What is your current job there?
I'm the Vice President responsible for Human Resources and Medical Staff Services.
And how long have you held that position?
Just over 6 years, I believe.
During 2018, who was your boss?
Rick Schmidt.
And during 2018, who were your direct reports?
I have several. You want to go?
Are there, how many are there approximately in number?
Probably 4 to 5, I would say.
Okay. And just, yes, identify those 4 to 5 people as of 2018 who reported directly to you.
Okay. Jill Hall. Let me think of my administrative assistant, who would have been Kristen Venturini at the time. I'm trying to, we have people in the medical staff office, so there would have been, one would be Jan Nye, Ashley Weinman, who else? Kim Johnson, and Melissa Hartnell.
Do you mind if I ask the spelling on those names? Or if you know. Is Jill Hall normal spelling?
Yep.
Okay, Kristen, is that, do you know if it's I-N, E-N?
I-N.
I-N, and is it a C-H or a K?
K.
Okay, and Venturini?
Ventrini.
Okay, and what is it? Jane Nye, what about Nye?
NYE.
And Ashley, is that A-S-H-L-E-Y?
Yep.
Okay, and Weinman, is that W-I-N? Sorry, go ahead.
W-E-I-N-M-A-N-N.
So W-E-I-N.
Yep.
M-A-N. Is there 2 N's at the end? I'm sorry.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. And Kim Johnson, is that normal spelling?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and Melissa Hartnell, I guess Hartnell.
Hartnell.
Oh, now, okay. Okay, and Melissa, is that 1 S or 2?
2.
Okay, and Rich Schmidt, is Schmidt S-C-H-M-I-T-T?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. I just unfortunately want to have the correct spellings in the record.
No problem.
Mr. Olson?
Thank you. And Mr. Schmidt's job in 2018 was what?
President and CEO.
Were you involved in the hiring of Ms. Sherry?
I don't recall.
Do you recall that she commenced her employment with Froedtert South on May 2nd, 2016? Or can we stipulate to that?
I can't confirm that. I can't confirm that without looking at documents.
Can we stipulate to that, Attorney Krakowski, or should we wait?
Well, I can tell you in a minute.
Okay.
There was a physician's employment agreement made on the 20th day of January 2016, and I can't confirm that that was the
Okay.
start date.
All right. Well, we'll get that in through another witness. Do you have knowledge of Ms. Sherry working under a written contract?
Yes.
And was that a 3-year written contract?
I do not recall her contract.
Are you aware that when Ms. Sherry was hired that she worked as a physician's assistant?
I am.
Did she work as a physician's assistant with the cardiothoracic and vascular surgery team?
She did.
Can you repeat that, Mr. Olson?
Yes. Did Ms. Sherry work as a physician's assistant with the cardiothoracic and vascular surgery team?
Thank you. And you can repeat your answer.
Yes.
To whom did Ms. Sherry report in her job?
Susan Ventura.
Oh, and can you spell Ventura?
Ventura.
Thank you.
Was Ms. Ventura Ms. Sherry's direct supervisor, or did she have a physician who supervised her?
Clinical. Can you repeat the question?
Sure. Was there a physician who supervised Ms. Sherry?
Yes.
Was there more than one physician who supervised Ms. Sherry?
I am not certain without looking at documents.
Who is the physician that you do know supervised Ms. Sherry?
Dr. Minnie Sivadasan.
Oh, and can you please spell that?
I have that. It's Sividasan.
Okay, thank you.
And were you involved in the hiring of Dr. Minnie Sivadasan?
I do not completely recall.
Was Dr. Sivadasan under a written contract?
I believe that to be accurate.
What was the term of that contract in terms of time period?
I do not know.
Do you know when Dr. Sivadasan was hired?
I do not.
Did you receive any information from any source that Dr. Sivadasan put a patient's health or safety at risk?
Can you repeat the question?
Did you receive any information from any source that Dr. Sivadasan put a patient's health or safety at risk?
Objection. I'm going to ask that the question be more specific. It's vague and ambiguous.
How so?
That could be any time period, and it could be health and safety at risk, could mean anything.
Okay, can you limit the time period, Mr. Olson?
During 2018, did you receive any information from any source that Dr. Sivadasan put a patient's health or safety at risk?
I do not recall.
You don't have any memory of any health or safety concern raised in 2018 about Dr. Sivadasan?
Not coming to mind that was reported to me.
So you were not present during any conversation when the concern about Dr. Sivadasan was raised, that she was jeopardizing health or safety of a patient. Is that correct?
Well, I guess my response would be I don't know. I don't understand your definition of that, so I wouldn't be able to answer that question.
Okay, well, let's break it down. You understand what a health risk for a patient would be?
In what is your definition?
It's where a doctor is not following normal protocol in terms of treating the patient correctly. And by their conduct or lack of conduct, they're putting the health of the patient at risk.
That's
Objection. We're not dealing with a specific incident. If you want to ask about that, or if you have a little more information about how the witness can answer the question, I would advise the witness to answer, but I don't even understand the question.
Why don't we try asking the question again, Mr. Olson?
Sure. And let me lay foundation. I gathered from the records that you were in a series of meetings with staff and administration and with Dr. Sivadathan, that there was discussion that she was engaging in conduct that put the health or safety of patients at risk. Do you remember any of those communications?
I do not.
Did you read any of the documents regarding meetings about Dr. Sivadathan in preparation for your testimony today?
I did not.
Did Dr. Abu, and that's spelled A-B-B-O, complain about Dr. Sivadathan?
Not that I'm aware of.
Did Angie Pfeiffer complain about Dr. Sivadathan?
Not that I recall.
Can you repeat that second name?
Angie Pfeiffer is P-F-I-E-F-F-E-R.
May I just ask one question, a clarifying question? The answer, when you are saying complain, what is your definition of complaint?
Coming to you with an objection or in your presence, stating an objection about the way that Dr. Sivadathan was behaving in the workplace.
So what I would say is that in my role, I get many complaints about physicians, and in that area, I take those complaints. Many of them resolve themselves in a very short period of time because they come with emotion, but I do not recall any that were out of the ordinary. But it is possible that I, at some point had conversations, because I hear conversations frequently in a broad sense.
Did Ms. Pfeiffer complain that Dr. Sivadathan was mistreating her in the workplace?
I do not, again, it's possible. I do not recall a specific conversation with Ms. Pfeiffer.
Did Bessa Aligi, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, maybe you have that pronunciation for me, complain about Dr. Sivadathan?
I do recall a situation, but I do not believe it was just Dr. Sivadathan. It was a combination of several personalities in the office that she felt uncomfortable continuing in that area.
And can I just have a standing objection to this? I didn't know that would go on this long, otherwise I would have objected sooner, but we're not dealing, my objection is relevancy because we're dealing with what happened with the complainant in this case and not necessarily who reported or who had problems with Dr. Sivadathan. And so, in my opinion, it's irrelevant, and I want to have a standing objection to that.
Okay, your objection is noted. I'll allow the testimony to continue for now and give it the weight that it's due.
What was?
Can I get the name, please, again?
Yeah, it's spelled B-E-S-A.
I'm sorry, let's just repeat that. B-E-S-A.
Last name is A-L-I-J-I.
A-L-I-J-I.
J-I.
Okay.
And what was Ms. Aligi's complaint about Dr. Sivadathan?
To be honest, it was so long ago, I do not remember the specifics.
Did Chris Leslie complain about Dr. Sivadathan?
And is that CH or?
That's
okay.
a K-R-I-S-L-E-S-L-I-E.
Again, I hear about things from Chris. Chris is the head of our OR. I hear from her frequently on a number of issues. It's very possible at some point she shared feedback about Dr. Sivadathan.
But you don't recall anything about Dr. Sivadathan putting patient health and safety at risk coming from Leslie?
I do not.
Did Kathy Turek complain about Dr. Sivadathan?
Not to me.
Did Brandy
Kathy.
Ford
I'm sorry, Kathy.
Kathy with a K, Turek is Turek. Did Brandy Ford complain about Dr. Sivadathan?
Not to me.
Did you receive any information from any source that Dr. Sivadathan mistreated an FSI employee, a Froedtert South employee?
I do not. There were allegations, but they were investigated and addressed, to my knowledge, but I don't remember the specifics.
What was the most serious allegation about Dr. Sivadathan mistreating an employee of Froedtert South?
Objection. Again, I'm going to state that this is irrelevant to the case. This is not a malpractice case. This is not a case involving whether Dr. Sivadathan practiced in the best possible way or had any issues at all with any other employees. These are, now we've listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different employees, and whether there were complaints regarding Dr. Sivadathan, it's not relevant to this case.
Mr. Olson?
It's relevant if a number of people complain that Dr. Sivadathan was abusive, was absent from her duties, was putting health and safety of patients at risk. If other people complained, then it adds to the veracity and credibility of Ms. Sherry's complaints.
Okay, I'm going to allow you to continue for now and give the testimony the way, I'm sorry, yes, give the testimony the way it's due.
Did you receive information from any source that Dr. Sivadathan mistreated a Froedtert South employee? The last question after that was, what was the worst incident?
Yeah, I don't recall any specifics about incidents. I do recall that at times Ms. Sherry had expressed concerns about her interactions with Dr. Sivadathan, but it was very common that those concerns would occur and then be resolved between the two of them in a matter of days. That was a trend throughout their time working together.
How many times did Ms. Sherry complain to you or in your presence about Ms. Sivadathan or Dr. Sivadathan?
I do not recall a number.
Can you estimate?
I wouldn't speculate because I do not know for certain.
Did anyone leave Froedtert South's employ indicating that it was because of Dr. Sivadathan?
You know, I'll object on relevancy again with regard to, we're talking about a case that's brought by Charnay Sherry, or the complainant in this case, and Nick, if you know the answer, you can answer, but I don't see how that's relevant to this case.
Your objection's noted. Can you answer the question, Mr. Gallick?
You know, I don't think I can answer for 100% certainty.
Did you receive any information that someone left the employment of Froedtert South specifically because of Dr. Sivadathan?
I believe that, not that I was involved in, but I believe that there was one instance of that occurring.
Who is that?
Bridget Tierney,
What was her job?
physician assistant.
Did someone do an exit interview with her?
It was not done by me.
Do you know who did one?
I do not recall.
Okay.
What was the source of-
I'm sorry, what was this? Is it Bridget? Is that normal spelling? Bridget? Is that correct? Anyone?
I'm not sure, Nick, if you know how to spell Bridget.
Is it Tierney?
Yes, it was normal Bridget.
Okay, and Tierney?
Tierney.
Thank you.
What is the source of your information that Bridget Tierney left because of Dr. Sivadathan?
To be honest, I don't recall. It is something that I feel like I have knowledge to peripherally.
Was it documented somewhere?
It could have been.
Are exit interviews normally conducted for departing employees?
Not necessarily.
Did Dr. Sivadathan complain about any FSI, about any Froedtert South employee?
That's a very broad question. Is there any specific that you're looking for?
Do you recall any complaints that Dr. Sivadathan made to you about any Froedtert South employee?
I don't remember the specifics, but I will tell you that there are many doctors that I interact with on a daily basis, and I would guess every person has had a complaint about someone at one time or the other.
Is there any complaint by Dr. Sivadathan that sticks out in your mind that was particularly egregious or that was legitimate and you had to take corrective action in response? Anything like that?
No, as I said before, in many cases, you know, it's not uncommon for a surgeon to have personality conflicts, and it's very common for me to mediate those when they come up.
Did Dr. Sivadathan have personality conflicts with staff?
Well, absolutely. The one obviously that I recall was Ms. Sherry.
Did she have personality conflicts with anyone other than Ms. Sherry?
I believe so, but I do not have any specifics related to those.
Was the conflict between Ms. Sherry and Dr. Sivadathan merely a personality conflict, or did it go beyond that?
That would be, are you asking my opinion?
I'm asking your knowledge as the VP of HR working at this facility.
Yeah, based on my evaluation of what I am aware of, I believe my personal belief is that there was a personality conflict.
And nothing more than that?
Again, from my ability to judge, no.
So it sounds like you never heard or received any objective information from any source that Dr. Sivadathan, according to Ms. Sherry, was putting the health or safety of patients at risk.
As I said before, I don't recall anything, but I receive lots of documents all the time.
Do you recall a meeting on June 1 of 2018 with Ms. Sherry when she discussed concerns regarding Dr. Sivadathan when the chief medical officer was present?
Chief medical officer. We don't have a chief medical officer.
All right. Were you in a meeting when a physician was present and Ms. Sherry addressed her concerns regarding Dr. Sivadathan?
Again, you'll have to be more specific. I don't know who you're referring to.
So you don't recall Dr. Trimark being present in a meeting with Dr. Sherry, with Ms. Sherry, when Ms. Sherry talked about her concerns about the health and safety of patients being jeopardized by Dr. Sivadathan. Is that correct?
I do not recall being in a meeting with Dr. Trimark. And just for clarification, Dr. Trimark is not the chief medical officer.
Uh-huh. What is his position?
He's the chief medical information officer. He works with our IT system.
Okay.
And what is, I'm sorry, what is Dr. Trimar's spelling?
Trimark.
Does Dr. Trimark treat patients at Froedtert South?
Yes.
And were you in a meeting when Ms. Sherry was told that she was put on paid administrative leave?
No.
Were you aware of any investigation into complaints by Ms. Sherry about Dr. Sivadathan?
Can you repeat that question for me, Mr. Olson?
Yes. Were you aware that Ms. Sherry was put on paid administrative leave?
She was not. Not that I'm sorry, I was not in a meeting related to that.
And you were not given notice of that?
I'm not aware of that at all.
Who put her on paid administrative leave?
Can you repeat that question?
Yes. Do you know who put Ms. Sherry on paid administrative leave?
Well, as I said in the question prior, I am not aware that Ms. Sherry was put on paid administrative leave.
Did you receive information that Dr. Sivadathan told Ms. Sherry that she could not give training lectures to staff?
That's vaguely familiar.
Did you do anything in response to that information?
I recall a situation where Dr. Sivadathan had made some comments in one of the interactions between Ms. Sherry, and I believe, to the best of my knowledge, which is that I met with Ms. Sherry, and I do not recall if Mrs. Ventura was with me, but we shared with Ms. Sherry that Dr. Sivadathan does not have that authority.
Did you tell Dr. Sivadathan that she did not have that authority?
Yes.
When did you tell her that?
I do not recall, but I know that I'm the situation you're referring to. I do know that I personally had conversation with Dr. Sivadathan to remind her that she does not have the authority to make those type of decisions.
Was anything put in her personnel file in that regard?
Not that I don't recall.
Did you receive information that Dr. Sivadathan told Froedtert South employees that Ms. Sherry had been fired?
I did receive that information.
From what source?
I honestly don't recall the specific source, but I do know that when that situation occurred, again, we had informed Ms. Sherry that Dr. Sivadathan did not have that authority, and we also informed Dr. Sivadathan that she did not have that authority.
Did you put anything in Dr. Sivadathan's personnel file that she didn't have the authority to tell staff that Ms. Sherry had been fired?
I do not recall.
Was that a violation of policy for Dr. Sivadathan to tell staff that Ms. Sherry had been fired?
Objection. What policy are we referring to? It's vague and ambiguous.
I can ask a different question. As the Vice President of Human Resources, do you know if Dr. Sivadathan telling employees that Ms. Sherry had been fired when she didn't have the authority to do so violated a company policy?
Something like that requires a lot of investigation. I would not be able to answer that on the spot without doing research.
And you didn't do that investigation or research at the time that you spoke to Ms. Sherry and Dr. Sivadathan, correct?
Again, I don't recall the details surrounding it, but again, as I shared with you, what I do recall is that I did have a conversation with Dr. Sivadathan, and in any type of corrective action process, your first step is to have a counseling session and offer the person an opportunity to identify why they were taking the action.
And what did Dr. Sivadathan say was her motive in telling people that when she didn't have the authority to do so?
Again, I don't recall the specifics of that conversation.
And you don't know whether or not she violated a company policy, correct?
As I shared, without reviewing several documents and having more internal discussion, I would not be able to evaluate that right now.
Did Ms. Sherry request a transfer because of the health and safety concerns related to Dr. Sivadathan?
Again, as I mentioned before, I am not aware of health and safety concerns. However, it is possible.
You thought it was just a personality conflict was the only reason that Ms. Sherry did not want to work with Dr. Sivadathan anymore, correct?
That is my recollection.
Uh-huh. And nothing comes to mind, anything more serious than really a trivial personality conflict, right?
That is my recollection.
And did you tell Ms. Sherry that you thought it was a trivial personality conflict?
Objection to the word trivial. I mean, that's again vague and ambiguous term.
It's very specific.
I think you need to lay a foundation for what you mean by personality conflict and where you're getting that information.
The speaking objections, I think, are designed to coach the witness, and it's improper.
Well, Mr. Galich himself, I believe, used the term personality conflict. So I think that's where that comes from. As far as trivial, I mean, you can, if you just want to continue with the question with personality conflict.
So did you tell Ms. Sherry that the problem between her and Dr. Sivadathan, in your opinion, was a trivial personality conflict?
You know, I don't recall the specifics if I did that.
Upon what basis did you conclude that it was merely a trivial personality conflict between the two of them?
Again, objection to the definition of the word trivial. If you want to answer that question, you can describe what you thought.
Sir, you know what the word trivial means, right?
Say that again?
You know what the word trivial means, correct?
Yeah. I'm sorry, you're cutting. I'm hearing like wind in the background. I'm having a hard time hearing you, sir.
Yeah, I think that might be coming from headphones. You know what the term trivial means, correct?
I have a general understanding.
Okay. Did you tell anyone that strike that. Upon what basis did you conclude that the problem between Dr. Sivadathan and Ms. Sherry was merely a trivial personality conflict?
Objection. I think you're using words that the witness didn't use. I don't remember him using the word trivial.
Sustained.
Was it your conclusion that it was a trivial personality conflict between the two of them?
It was not.
How would you characterize this personality conflict?
As I stated before, my belief is that throughout the time there were what I would call interpersonal challenges that occurred. They appeared to resolve themselves over time. So based on the pattern of what had happened, that was my basis for my belief.
Was there a time, though, when the conflict between Sherry and Sivadathan did not resolve?
Yes, towards the end of the time, I don't recall the date, but there was a day where it was felt that there probably wasn't a way to resolve the relationship.
Upon what did you base that conclusion?
If I recall correctly, it was when if I recall, I remember Ms. Sherry being extremely emotional related to interactions, and it was felt that her response was such that likely there was not a way to resolve the situation.
What did she do to be extremely emotional?
Say that again?
What did Ms. Sherry do or say when she was extremely emotional? Or what indicated that to you?
Well, she was crying. Tears were coming out of her eyes. Her body was bright red, and she was shaking.
Who was present?
I know that Susan Ventura was present. However, I do not recall the others present.
When was the meeting?
I do not recall the specific date.
How long was the meeting?
I don't recall.
Do we have a year at least for the meeting?
It would have been. What was the? It would have been the last year that she was employed with us.
2018. Do you know how long it was prior to the end of her employment that this meeting occurred?
It was closer to the end, but I can't give you a specific date.
Was there a plan put in place at the end of this meeting as to what the next step would be?
Yes.
What was the plan?
The plan was to allow Ms. Sherry some time that day. Mrs. Ventura, I recall, allowed her to go home and just said, take some time today and, you know, to calm down, and then revisit that at a later date.
Was the meeting recorded in some manner?
It could have been, I do not recall.
Do you normally take meeting or notes at those kinds of meetings?
It's possible. Again, I do not recall this specific situation.
Were you asked to look for notes or records regarding this meeting in the discovery process in this case?
Yes.
And did you find any notes?
I do not recall. It was over a year ago that that process occurred.
Did you understand that as a result of this meeting, there would be a change in Ms. Sherry's employment status?
No.
Other than her going home and calming down, was there anything else that was decided in terms of a plan going forward?
Not at that moment, no.
When was the next time the status of Ms. Sherry's employment was discussed?
If I recall a meeting later where Ms. Ventura and I were present, where Ms. Ventura talked to Charnay about whether or not the working relationship would be salvageable, and I recall that the decision at that time between Ms. Sherry and Mrs. Ventura was that it would not be.
Was that meeting recorded in some manner?
Again, it's been a year. I don't recall.
Was anything else discussed in that conversation?
There was discussion of the fact that Ms. Sherry was looking for other employment, and also in cardiothoracic surgery. At the time, Ms. Ventura suggested to Ms. Sherry that she would be looking for other opportunities throughout the organization, because we very much respect and continue to this day to respect and see how talented Ms. Sherry is. We did not want her to leave. We wanted to find a way to keep her and get her a position at Froedtert South.
Was she given options for staying at Froedtert South?
She was.
What were the options?
Again, this is based on the best of my recollection, but the best of my recollection was there was an option to go work in one of our family practice clinics immediately. There was an option to go work in our in one of our oncology practices. There was discussion of potentially working for our affiliated hospitalist group. There was discussion about working for our affiliated neurosurgeon, and there was also discussion about the potential of working in with our pulmonology critical care.
And which of those are outside of Froedtert South in terms of the organization?
Sure. The ones that I recall is our hospitalist group. They are all on the medical staff with us. However, they are not. It's Infinity Healthcare manages that, and then our neurosurgeon is Neurosurgery and Endovascular Associates. That is a physician on our medical staff who has a practice outside, but practices here as well.
Was there ever a specific job that was identified that Ms. Sherry could work in immediately?
Yeah, immediately there was an offer to go work in our in family practice, and specifically in immediate care clinics, to be able to keep her employed. right away. But if I recall, she rejected those offers.
Was there a specific offer that she work in oncology?
There was.
And she expressed an interest in working in oncology, at least on an interim basis, correct?
That is correct. However, if I recall the conversation correctly, Ms. Sherry was, after that conversation, Ms. Sherry was supposed to respond to Mrs. Ventura to let her know if that was an option she truly did want to move forward with, and that conversation never occurred until Ms. Sherry showed up at the clinic.
Do you have personal knowledge of those communications?
Those are communications that I have heard peripherally.
Okay. So you're volunteering this information about things that somebody else told you that happened in communication with Ms. Sherry, is that correct?
I thought you were asking me what I know about it.
Okay, what did you do to prepare for your testimony today?
As I said, I really did not review any documents. I spoke to my attorney for about 10 or 15 minutes where she told me to tell the truth.
Did you talk to Ms. Ventura?
I have conversations with Ms. Ventura every day.
About the hearing? About the
hearing?
Right.
I'm sure that at some point I've had conversations with her about the hearing, but nothing specific.
In preparation with your attorney, and I'm not asking you for specific things that were discussed, was Ms. Ventura also present?
Objection. This is borderline attorney-client privilege.
It's borderline, but it's not attorney-client.
I think that anything that is going to be disclosed that my client and I talked about, other than the fact that he's already told you generally that he hasn't reviewed anything and he knows that he was going to be telling the truth today. If I'm going to have him answer anything regarding conversations between myself and my client, I think that's protected by attorney-client privilege.
Where are we going with this, Mr. Olson?
I just asked him who was present when he talked with counsel in preparation for the hearing, specifically whether Ms. Ventura was there.
We're bordering on an attorney-client privilege. You can answer that question. I guess you answer it, but I just don't understand where we're going with this.
Was Ms. Ventura present at any time when you prepared for the hearing?
We're assuming that we prepared for the hearing with Mr. Galich.
When you talked to the attorney in preparation for the hearing, at any time was Ms. Ventura present also in that conversation?
Again, objection. That's attorney-client privilege.
I'm not asking for the communication. I'm only asking who was present.
Can you answer the question, Mr. Galich?
For when I was prepared, when I was talked to Ms. Krakowski, no. It was just Ms. Krakowski and myself.
Did Froedtert South communicate to Ms. Sherry that it was going to do anything to correct Dr. Sivadathan's behavior?
We would have told Ms. Sherry that we would address it, and that would have been the communication.
And what was the behavior that was going to be addressed?
Again, it's been, as I shared before, it's been so long I don't recall the details.
Did Froedtert South communicate to Ms. Sherry that if Dr. Sivadathan's behavior was not corrected, then Dr. Sivadathan would be terminated?
We would not I don't recall any conversation of that. We would not do that.
Do you recall investigating any complaints against Dr. Sivadathan?
It's very possible, but I don't recall specifics.
When there's an investigation that's conducted, is a report created?
It depends.
Was there a report created for investigation into Dr. Sivadathan?
I do not recall.
Who would know that?
It would be me, but as I shared with you, if I haven't reviewed things, I wouldn't be able to tell you that.
Are there any sealed hospital records regarding Dr. Sivadathan?
There could be.
You have knowledge of that?
I don't recall the specifics, no.
You recall generally?
No, I mean, any type of medical staff communication or things that are done under peer review are sealed. I do not recall I don't recall if there are documents or not.
I'm going to object to as to the word sealed as vague and ambiguous.
What do you mean by the
Okay.
word? What do you mean by sealed?
You asked the question.
I'm asking the witness what he means by sealed because he said.
You asked him the question.
Yeah,
What do you mean by that?
Well, let's go through the judge. I'm not going to argue with you, Attorney Kirkpatrick.
I don't know if he used the word sealed or not. He responded to you asking if there was any sealed records, and he said there could be. So why don't we go from there?
Right. So I think you said that in the context of peer review, I thought you said that all those records were sealed. Is that correct?
I didn't use the word. I did not use the word sealed.
Okay. What did you understand happened with peer review records?
Peer review records are protected under the Healthcare Quality Improvement Act. But again, I don't recall specific documents related to Dr. Sivadathan.
Call a nurse first name Amanda requesting a transfer to a department outside of Dr. Sivadathan's department?
I'm sorry, I don't know what you're speaking of.
Were you involved in the termination of Ms. Sherry?
No, because Sherry was not terminated.
What was your understanding, or how would you characterize the separation?
Ms. Sherry failed to respond to phone calls and final communication.
By you or by somebody else?
I do not recall.
Can you identify any communication you made to Ms. Sherry that she failed to respond to?
I can't recall specifically, but I vaguely recall phone calls.
So was she terminated because she did not respond?
Again, as I shared,
Objection. Go ahead, Nick.
again, as I shared, Ms. Sherry was not terminated.
So what was how do you characterize the separation? You said she didn't respond to communication, so her employment ended. Are you saying she abandoned her job or something else?
how I would characterize it is that Ms. Sherry was given opportunities by Mrs. Ventura for different jobs. Ms. Sherry discontinued conversations with us as to what action she was taking. If I recall correctly, Ms. Sherry was able to secure a position in cardiothoracic services, which was her preferred area, and we were very happy for her to, find a position that fulfilled her. However, when that happened, when that was going on, she stopped communicating with us, so we had only concluded that she wished to exercise the option to move on.
So when a written contract is ended, what's the process that's followed to facilitate that?
That typically is managed through our CEO's office.
I'm sorry, your what office?
The CEO's office.
Okay.
So were you involved at all in facilitating the end of the written contract with Ms. Sherry?
I believe that I assisted in drafting the letter asking for Ms. Sherry to respond to make one final attempt to work with her, but that's to the extent that I recall.
What is the process that's followed for an employee to approve the use of their PTO time? To the best of my knowledge, the employee, especially in the clinics, must request that PTO through their supervisor, which in this, and then that supervisor will either approve or reject that. And that's done on a form, is that correct?
Yes. However, I have seen it done alternative ways.
For which employees?
As far as what?
Doing it other than on a written form?
Yeah, it's typically at the manager's discretion to work with their employees to identify that, but most commonly I see it done with a form.
Well, in fact, doesn't the payroll department require that so they can keep an accurate record?
No, the PTO is kept in a time recording system.
You cannot identify any employee whose PTO was authorized and there was no written record of it. Is that correct?
I can't right now. I'm just sharing in general.
Was there ever any discipline against Dr. Sivadosan?
I need you to define what that is.
Okay. You don't define discipline in the policies as the EP of HR?
I know I'm asking your definition. You asked the question.
Okay. Do you use a progressive discipline process at Froedtert South?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So when I say progressive discipline, you know what that means, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what is the progressive discipline at Froedtert South?
It's a laddered system that, as you said, it progressively increases based on number and severity of infraction.
Okay. And the company can skip any of the steps at any time they want, right?
Based on the severity of the infraction, correct.
Okay. And it's something like it starts with a verbal warning, written warning, suspension, performance improvement plan, termination, something like that. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So, Dr. Sivadathan, did she ever receive any discipline using any of those terms?
I don't recall, not that rose to my level.
So who would have had knowledge of that?
Typically, disciplines start with direct supervisor. That would have been Susan Ventura.
And you didn't hear anything secondhand about any discipline against Dr. Sivadathan, is that correct?
Not that I recall.
Did Ms. Sherry indicate to you that she was concerned Dr. Sivadathan would retaliate against her because Ms. Sherry was complaining about her?
I do not recall.
In 2018, was the cardiothoracic and vascular surgery profitable for Froedtert South?
I would not have direct knowledge of that.
You have a general understanding that that's a profit center for Froedtert South?
I believe that my knowledge is that it's all relative.
Relatively speaking, is that the most profitable area for Froedtert South?
I do not know.
In 2018, was Dr. Sivadathan the person primarily responsible for the revenue stream coming from cardiothoracic and vascular surgery?
I guess I don't know how to answer that.
Is she the only heart doctor in that department, or the only surgeon?
She was. She was the only heart surgeon.
Well, Ms. Ventura stating that Froedtert South needed to keep Dr. Sivadathan so that the cardiothoracic and vascular surgery department could continue?
I am not personally aware of that.
You're aware that Ms. Sherry was told that if she decided to leave, that the non-compete agreement would be enforced against her, correct?
I do not recall that specifically.
Was that your understanding generally, that the non-compete would be enforced against her if she left?
I don't believe, if I recall correctly, I don't believe that it was an issue because I do recall the conversation, and Ms. Sherry was very forthright. Most of the places for employment that she was looking for were Milwaukee or north of that area, so it would have been irrelevant.
Were you present when she was told that the non-compete would not be enforced against her?
I don't recall a conversation that it wouldn't be enforced. As I just mentioned, I don't believe that it was an issue because of where Ms. Sherry had shared that she was looking for employment.
Well, were you aware that she was required to look for places outside of the scope of the non-compete?
Again,
Or do you not have knowledge of that?
Again, I don't believe she was required to do anything. I think she was asked. She had voluntarily shared that information of where she was looking. So, again, it's irrelevant.
Did Ms. Sherry discuss with you her desire to do a critical care position, at least on an interim basis?
Yes, I was part of those discussions. That was part of when I shared with you that there was a discussion about pulmonology and critical care. That is what I was referring to.
And was pulmonary within Froedtert South, or was that an outside position?
It is an employed group, correct? Part of our
So
medical group.
it's outside of Froedtert South, correct?
No, it is part of our medical group. Like it is an employee. It's the same type of employment situation.
Okay, but there was no specific job open for her to go into there, correct?
That is correct. At the time, we did not have a position. Mrs. Ventura was looking into trying to make something work in that area, but at the time there was no specific position open.
Did Ms. Sherry indicate to you that she wanted to continue her skill set in cardiothoracic surgery?
Yeah, I'm starting to have a hard time. You're breaking up on my phone, Mr. Olson. Could you repeat? I apologize.
Did Ms. Sherry indicate to you that she wanted to continue her skill set in cardiothoracic surgery?
I do recall that as part of the conversations, and that was why